maybe we're not the only ones watching the sky.
My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Well, if there's another thing, it's rotating.
Perhaps we've already been visited without realizing it. For many, sightings of UFOs and alien-like beings suggest this possibility. Although there are various theories, one of the most widely supported is that these are spacecraft and intelligent entities from other worlds. In this documentary, we will unveil fascinating UFO cases, featuring numerous incidents involving humanoid beings. Many of these accounts come from declassified files, released after being kept secret for decades. The Kapustin Yar Incident. In the summer of 1948, something extraordinary took place at a Russian military base. Kapustin Yar, the Soviet equivalent of Area 51, served as a testing site for missiles and advanced technology under strict surveillance. One afternoon, radar systems detected something unusual in the sky. A UFO moving at high speed. Radar operators alerted the officers, who quickly dispatched a fighter jet to intercept the target. Following orders, the pilot approached the object and was stunned by what he saw. It was a massive, metallic disc-shaped craft. It moved with remarkable agility, making turns that seemed physically impossible. Upon receiving the command, the pilot opened fire, and the craft began to lose altitude, spiraling downward. It crashed near the Kapustin Yar base, prompting an immediate military response. The wreckage, partially destroyed, displayed technology unlike anything known at the time. According to reports leaked years later, inside the craft were small beings with large heads and dark eyes. Soviet authorities quickly secured the area, transferring the remains of the craft to an underground facility within the base. It has been claimed that both the wreckage and its occupants were examined at Kapustin Yar, with efforts to replicate the technology. This military base is real, established in 1946 as a missile and rocket testing site. However, to this day, no official documentation confirms that this incident ever took place. The being of the Spanish airbase. On the night of November 12, 1976, at Talavera La Real Air Base in Spain, 3 soldiers were on patrol alongside a German Shepherd. They heard a noise similar to static interference, followed by a sharp, high-pitched beep. Seconds later, a light entered the perimeter of the airbase. The soldiers believed it was a terrorist attack. The country was going through a period of political instability and security concerns. Feeling uneasy, they tried to contact the base, but at that moment, something unsettling happened. After the sound of branches snapping, they spotted a towering humanoid figure with elongated arms and a soft green glow. One witness claimed it was wearing a tight metallic suit, with its head covered by what appeared to be a black helmet. The dog attempted to approach the figure, but an invisible barrier seemed to block its path. Then, the being made a sudden movement, and one soldier collapsed to the ground. His fellow troops reacted by firing hundreds of rounds at it. Unexpectedly, its glow intensified before vanishing completely. Three of the military witnesses fell into comas, and one later developed neurodegenerative diseases. In 2016, Spain's Ministry of Defense declassified this case, along with dozens of other files. The Creatures of Brazil. On January 20th, 1996, in the city of Varginha, Brazil, an event took place that left everyone baffled. It was a cloudy morning, typical of the rainy season. 3 women, aged 12 to 22, were walking through an open field when something caught their attention. A strange creature with brown skin and red eyes was crouched near a wall. It was a small being with an oversized head and protrusions on its forehead. The young women fled in terror, rushing to tell their families what they had just witnessed. Shortly after, local authorities arrived and immediately sealed off the area. Witnesses reported seeing Brazilian military vehicles transporting an unidentified object. In the hours that followed, rumors spread that additional creatures had been captured in the city. There was talk of an injured being taken to a medical facility under heavy security. Fear spread quickly, and the media began covering the event with intense interest. The Brazilian government denied any contact with extraterrestrial beings, attributing the panic to a misunderstanding. The aquatic humanoids of Lake Baikal. In the summer of 1982, a group of Soviet military divers was conducting exercises in Lake Baikal when something completely unexpected happened. During a deep dive, they encountered towering humanoid beings. These figures stood nearly 10 feet tall, clad in tight-fitting silver suits with black, helmet-like spheres covering their heads. Despite the frigid waters, the humanoids moved effortlessly, as if they belonged to the environment. Amazed, the divers attempted to get closer for a better look. After reporting the sighting to their superiors, a commanding officer gave the order to capture one of them. However, without warning, an invisible force pushed them back, and the divers were suddenly propelled toward the surface. This caused severe decompression sickness. 3 of the military personnel lost their lives, while 4 survived with serious after-effects. The incident was swiftly covered up, but rumors began circulating among soldiers and scientists. Reports of underwater beings along with various UFO sightings fueled speculation about the possible existence of alien bases within the lake. Some suggest these entities have coexisted with humans for millennia, or may have even preceded us on Earth. It is worth noting that the military may not have chosen their training dive locations at random. According to local residents, glowing silver discs are sometimes seen plunging into the water, or emerging with a thunderous roar. The Zimbabwe Encounter. On the morning of September 16, 1994, in the quiet, rural countryside of Zimbabwe, something extraordinary was about to unfold. At Ariel School, located in Rua, southeast of Harare, the usual calm of a school day filled the air. Children played in the yard, laughing and enjoying their break. Without warning, a metallic-looking craft emerged from the clouds. It descended smoothly, coming to a rest in a wooded area near the school. The children, astonished, watched as it settled on the ground. Several small humanoid figures stepped out of the craft. They had large, dark eyes and slightly elongated heads. The children stood frozen, watching as the beings moved across the terrain. One of them approached, gazing intently, conveying a silent message. The children described feeling a telepathic connection, receiving a warning about the planet's future. Then, just as suddenly as they arrived, the beings returned to their craft and vanished into the sky. Local authorities were notified, though few took the children's words seriously. However, their accounts were so consistent that researchers from around the world grew interested. The children were interviewed multiple times, yet their stories remained unchanged. The Pentagon UFOs. In December 2017, the world was shaken by the release of 3 declassified videos. Captured by U.S. Navy pilots, they defied conventional aeronautical understanding, sparking a global debate. The first video, titled FLIR, was recorded in November 2004 by a pilot from the USS Nimitz. The UFO, detected through infrared sensors, appeared oval-shaped and dark, hovering into the sky with no visible means of propulsion. It moves at incredible speed, accelerating rapidly and making abrupt turns. The astonished pilot comments on its velocity and erratic behavior. The second video, known as Gimbal, was filmed in January 2015. It depicts a saucer-shaped object gliding smoothly as the pilots watch in disbelief while it rotates on its axis. Their voices reflect confusion over what they are witnessing. Despite strong winds, the object remains stable, maneuvering with ease.
Well, if there's another thing, it's rotating.
The third video, Go Fast, also recorded in January 2015, captures a UFO moving swiftly over the ocean. It appears small and elongated, skimming over the water at a steady pace. The pilots attempt to track it, but its speed makes it difficult to keep within view. The absence of a propulsion trail makes the sighting even more perplexing. The Pentagon confirmed the authenticity of the footage, but refrained from commenting on the nature of the objects. Experts noted that the maneuvers displayed exceed the known capabilities of any human-made aircraft. The Voronezh Craft and Beings. On the afternoon of September 27, 1989, as a cool breeze swept through the city of Voronezh, south of Moscow, children played in a local park. Suddenly, a glowing object appeared in the sky, emitting a reddish light that caused everyone's attention. The oval-shaped craft, gleaming with a metallic sheen, slowly descended until it touched the ground. Both the children and a few adults watched in awe as a hatch on the ship began to open. From within, 2 tall, peculiar-looking beings emerged, accompanied by a small robot. The humanoid figures stood nearly 10 feet tall, with small heads and piercing gazes. One of them raised an arm, and a beam of light engulfed the witnesses, paralyzing them in place. The atmosphere became charged with an unexplainable energy, as if time itself had come to a halt. After what felt like an eternity, the beings retreated into their craft. The hatch sealed shut, and the ship soared into the sky, vanishing in an instant. Reports from the time indicated that investigators discovered unusual ground markings, suggesting a heavy object had landed. Additionally, abnormally high levels of radiation were detected in the area. The abduction of Travis Walton. It was November 5, 1975, deep in the forests of the Apache Sitgreaves area in Arizona, United States. Travis Walton, a young logger, and his crew were heading home after a long day of work in the woods. They traveled in a pickup truck along a forest road, chatting after an exhausting shift. Suddenly, a brilliant light illuminated the area, cutting through the darkness. Startled, the men stopped the vehicle, watching as a disc-shaped craft hovered among the trees. It emitted a soft, steady hum, while its lights flickered in a hypnotic pattern. Without hesitation, Travis Walton stepped out of the truck, drawn in by a mix of curiosity and awe. As he approached, a beam of light shot from the craft, striking Walton and hurling him through the air. His horrified companions saw his body crash to the ground, motionless, just as the craft began to ascend. Overcome with fear, the crew fled the scene at full speed, leaving Walton behind. Minutes later, guilt and dread compelled them to return, but by then, both Travis and the craft had vanished. His disappearance triggered a massive search effort, with rescue teams combing the area. Days passed with no sign of him, and rumors of his death or abduction spread throughout the small town of Snowflake. Walton's co-workers underwent lie detector tests, which yielded mixed results. Though, overall, their accounts remained credible. Then, on November 10th, 5 days after he vanished, Travis Walton reappeared, disoriented, at a gas station miles from where he had last been seen. He described waking up in a brightly lit room, surrounded by short, humanoid beings, with large eyes, bald heads, and pale skin. According to his account, he resisted until a human figure wearing a helmet arrived and moved him to another location, where 3 more humans placed a mask over his mouth, causing him to lose consciousness. His next memory was walking along a highway, confused, as the UFO hovered above him. The Rendlesham Forest Craft with Symbols. It was December 26, 1980, deep within the Rendlesham Forest in England. In the middle of the night, a series of strange lights were spotted by US soldiers, stationed at Woodbridge Air Base. The lights, with an unusual glow, moved silently between the trees. Slightly uneasy, the soldiers decided to investigate, venturing in to the dark forest. They were members of the United States Air Force, deployed at Bentwaters and Woodbridge air bases during the Cold War. Upon reaching the site, they saw a triangular craft with a metallic sheen hovering just above the ground. It emitted pulsating multicolored lights, casting an otherworldly glow across the surroundings. The soldiers felt the air thick with a static charge. Sergeant Jim Penningston stepped forward and touched the craft, noticing strange inscriptions carved into its surface. After a few minutes, the object slowly ascended before vanishing into the night sky. The following day, a military team was dispatched to examine the landing site. They discovered 3 triangular impressions where the craft had rested. Nearby trees showed signs of damage, and abnormal radiation levels were detected. British and American military authorities downplayed the event, attributing it to misidentified stars or the nearby Orford Ness Lighthouse. The hostile UFOs of Brazil. In 1977, on Colares Island, at the mouth of the Amazon River in Brazil, a series of terrifying events began to unfold. It all started one night when unknown lights appeared over the town. Described as spheres that changed colors, they flew low over the houses. But these weren't just sightings. They actively pursued people. According to witnesses, the lights fired beams at them, causing burns, dizziness, and exhaustion. Nearly every night they returned, forcing residents to stay indoors after sunset. Some began sleeping in groups or arming themselves, believing they were under attack by the mysterious lights. As fear escalated, Brazilian authorities decided to step in. The Brazilian Air Force launched an investigation under the code name Operação Prato. Military personnel arrived equipped with cameras, radar systems, and weapons, determined to uncover the truth. For weeks, they witnessed the inexplicable firsthand. These lights performed impossible maneuvers, directing beams at civilians. Officers documented the phenomenon through photographs and testimonies. Yet, they were unable to determine its origin. Months later, the strange lights ceased their harassment of the island's inhabitants. The official report from the operation was classified and remained a secret for years. Decades later, portions of Operatia Pratos files were declassified. Captain Juranja Hollanda stated that he had personally observed luminous objects executing maneuvers that suggested intelligent control. The Ancestral Incident of Japan. In 1803, off the coast of Hitachi, Japan, a group of fishermen discovered a mysterious vessel floating in the sea. They called it Utsuro Bune, or Hollow Ship. It was circular in shape, featuring glass windows and metallic panels. Some have speculated that illustrations from the 1840s depict symbols resembling those seen in the Rendlesham Forest incident. As they drew closer, they found a woman inside, dressed in unusual clothing and clutching a box she refused to let anyone touch. The fisherman attempted to communicate, but she did not speak Japanese. Japanese historians consider the story part of local folklore. Yet, some ufologists argue it could have been an encounter with an extraterrestrial being and its craft. The Scotland UFO photographs. In August 1990, something unusual took place near the town of Calvine, Scotland. Two men hiking through the hills spotted a strange object in the sky. It was a massive, diamond-shaped craft, hovering in complete silence. Stunned, they quickly snapped several photographs of the object. As they watched in disbelief, a military jet approached the scene. The craft remained motionless for a few minutes before ascending rapidly and vanishing. The men handed their photographs to a local newspaper, which then forwarded them to the Ministry of Defense. However, the images were never officially released and remained classified for years. In 2022, one of the photographs was finally unveiled, revealing the object in striking detail. They have been described as the clearest and most credible UFO photographs ever taken. The image provided by Craig Lindsay is an authentic copy of the original photo analyzed by the UK Ministry of Defence in 1990. no evidence of tampering was found in either the photograph or the print. The UFO pursuit in Peru. In 1980, near Arequipa, Peru, at La Jolla Air Base, an unidentified flying object was detected. Around 1,800 people on the base witnessed it, a spherical craft hovering motionless in the sky. Believing it to be espionage technology, the commanding officer ordered a Sukhoi Su-22 fighter jet to take off and intercept. The pilot, Oscar Santa Maria, spotted the object in the sky. It resembled a glowing balloon, but something felt off. It was a round silver craft with a transparent dome on top, lacking windows or any visible propulsion system. As he approached, the pilot fired a burst of 64 rounds. Yet, the craft showed no signs of damage. According to his account, he believed some bullets had hit the target, but they seemed to be absorbed by the sphere. The UFO moved with incredible agility, shifting direction and altitude rapidly, outmaneuvering the fighter jet. For 22 minutes, he attempted to chase the object, but it suddenly accelerated upward and vanished into the sky. To this day, this remains one of the rare instances where a human pilot has opened fire on a UFO. The Washington, D.C. UFOs. For 2 consecutive weekends, Washington, D.C. witnessed a series of UFO sightings that sparked controversy and fear. On the night of July 19, 1952, the skies over the U.S. Capitol were clear. Radar screens at Washington National Airport and Andrews Air Force Base began detecting multiple unidentified objects. They appeared and vanished erratically, moving at astonishing speeds, with no discernible pattern. Air traffic controllers, baffled, attempted to make contact, but received no response. The phenomenon persisted into the early hours, with several commercial pilots reporting lights performing extraordinary maneuvers. Panic started to spread as news of the sightings reached the media. The city seemed to be under some form of extraterrestrial surveillance. On July 26th, the lights returned, this time in even greater numbers. At that point, the Air Force decided to intervene, scrambling 2 F-94 Starfire jets to intercept the objects. As the pilots approached, they saw flashes of light, yet each time they tried to close in, the UFO darted away at incredible speeds. To reassure the public, the Air Force held a press conference on July 29.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem that have come to us from all kinds.
General John Samford, Director of Intelligence, claimed that the radar detected objects were pranks, misidentified aircraft, or electrical phenomena.
We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations.
The Roswell Incident. In July 1947, something extraordinary happened on the plains of New Mexico, United States. A rancher named Mac Brazel stumbled upon strange debris on his property in Corona, near the town of Roswell. The wreckage included metallic sheets, rubber strips, and small fragments, unlike anything he had seen before. Curious, Brazel took some pieces to the sheriff's office, who then contacted the nearby Army Air Base. An intelligence officer from the base, Major Jesse Marcel, was dispatched to investigate the site. On July 8, 1947, a military press release announced that a flying saucer had been recovered. However, the very next day, the story changed. The wreckage was now said to be from a weather balloon. Major Jesse Marcel later displayed some debris to the press, which appeared ordinary and not of extraterrestrial origin. Following the official explanation, the Roswell case faded from public memory, only to resurface in 1978. Researcher Stanton Friedman interviewed Major Marcel, who claimed the debris was alien and that the government had covered it up. He described a metallic sheet that crumpled easily, but returned to its original shape when released. Years later, his son, Jesse Marcel, stated that his father had shown him extraterrestrial wreckage, including one piece with strange symbols. By the 1980s, new witnesses emerged, claiming that alien bodies had also been recovered. In 1989, Glenn Dennis, a mortuary employee in Roswell, said the military had called him asking about small, airtight coffins. During the 1990s, additional witnesses came forward, alleging they had seen extraterrestrial bodies in hangars or military trucks. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force released a report reaffirming that the wreckage was part of Project Mogul, a classified balloon program. By 1997, a second report dismissed claims of alien bodies, explaining that the figures people saw were actually test dummies used in parachute experiments. The Lonnie Zamora Case. On April 24, 1964, in Socorro, New Mexico, police officer Lonnie Zamora was patrolling the streets late in the afternoon. Suddenly, a deafening roar and a bright flash in the sky caught his attention. Believing it to be an explosion or a car crash, Zamora drove toward the source of the sound, heading into a remote desert area. Upon arrival, he was stunned. A metallic egg-shaped craft was resting on the ground, with two humanoid figures nearby. The beings were small, dressed in gleaming suits. Dumbfounded, Zamora watched as they hurried into the craft and disappeared inside. Moments later, a thunderous blast erupted as the craft began to ascend. A blue flame shot from its underside before it accelerated and vanished from sight. Investigators from the Air Force and Project Blue Book examined the site, yet they failed to provide a definitive explanation. The Pascagoula Abduction. On October 11, 1973, in the quiet town of Pascagoula, Mississippi, an event unfolded that left a lasting remark on the lives of two men. It was a clear night when Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker, two shipyard workers, decided to go fishing alongside the Pascagoula River. Out of nowhere, a brilliant blue light appeared in the sky, speeding toward them. Frozen in disbelief, they watched as an oval-shaped craft descended and hovered just above the water, not far from where they stood. The object floated silently, casting a glow that illuminated the entire area. Before they could react, a hatch opened, and three entities drifted toward them. The beings stood around 5 feet tall, with grayish skin and elongated limbs, ending in claw-like hands. Their heads lacked visible eyes, instead featuring 3 long, cone-shaped protrusions where ears and a nose would normally be. Both men found themselves paralyzed, unable to resist as the entities carried them inside the craft. Once inside, they were separated and subjected to what seemed like medical examinations. Hickson described being scanned by a floating, eye-like device that emitted a sweeping light over his body. Parker, however, recalled fewer details, stating that he was in shock, barely conscious throughout the ordeal. After what felt like an eternity, They were taken back to the dock and released before the craft swiftly ascended and vanished. At first, authorities were skeptical, but the raw emotion in their accounts convinced officers that something unusual had occurred. Both men later underwent a polygraph test, which suggested they were telling the truth. The Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter. On August 21, 1955, at an isolated farm in Kentucky, a family experienced a night that defied all logic. It was a sweltering summer Sunday, and the Sutton family, along with some friends, was enjoying a peaceful evening. A sudden flash in the sky caught their attention, followed by an object descending into the nearby woods. Billy Ray Taylor, one of the guests, stepped outside to investigate. When he returned, pale and shaken, he claimed to have seen a flying saucer land behind the house. Skeptical, the others followed him outside, only to witness something that sent chills down their spines. Small figures began emerging from the darkness. The creature stood about 3 feet tall, with pointed ears, glowing eyes, and elongated arms. Slowly, they advanced toward the house. Terrified, the men grabbed rifles and fired, but the bullets seemed to bounce off their bodies, as if they were shielded. The families retreated indoors, barricading the doors and windows while the entities attempted to enter. For hours, the Suttons and their guests remained trapped, listening to footsteps and scratching sounds on the roof and walls. Eventually, the being slipped away into the night. When the police arrived, they found no sign of the intruders, only strange ground markings and evidence of the family's frantic attempt to defend themselves. The abduction of Barney and Betty Hill. It was a dark September night in 1961 when Barney and Betty Hill were driving home to Portsmouth after a vacation in Canada. As they traveled along a deserted highway through the White Mountains, a light appeared in the sky, seemingly following their car. The object moved unpredictably, growing larger as they continued down the road. Concerned, Barney pulled over and stepped out with binoculars to get a closer look. He spotted a massive, disc-shaped craft hovering at low altitude. As it approached, an overwhelming sense of fear took hold of him, and he sprinted back to the car. Pressing down on the gas, he sped along the highway, but the light descended and forced them to stop. The enormous craft, measuring around 100 feet across, floated directly in front of them. Through his binoculars, Barney saw several windows with humanoid figures visible inside. When they finally arrived home, the Hills noticed strange details. Their watches had stopped, the straps on the binoculars were broken, and Betty's dress was torn. In search of answers, they reached out to a psychiatrist specializing in regression hypnosis, Dr. Benjamin Simon. Under hypnosis, Betty recalled seeing a map which she believed depicted interstellar travel routes. Years later, some researchers suggested it matched the star system Zeta Reticuli. She also described undergoing a physical examination, where a needle was inserted into her abdomen. Meanwhile, Barney recounted seeing humanoid beings with large heads and oversized eyes. The beings of Cisco Grove. On September 4, 1964, deep in the forests of Cisco Grove, California, a hunter endured a night of absolute terror. Young Donald Shroom had ventured into the woods in search of deer. As dusk settled, he realized he had lost his way. With nightfall approaching, he decided to climb a tall tree to stay safe from predators. While settling on a sturdy branch, something unusual caught his eye in the sky. A distant light appeared, moving slowly in his direction. At first, he assumed it was a helicopter, but as it neared, the glow revealed a metallic disc-shaped craft. Moments later, humanoid figures emerged beneath the tree where he was perched, small in stature, thin-bodied with glowing red eyes. Alongside them, Shroom described a towering robotic figure with luminous eyes. The entities attempted to climb but struggled to reach his position. In desperation, he ignited several flares to drive them away, yet they remained undeterred. One of the beings raised a strange tube and released a gas, causing him to feel dizzy. Terrified, Shroom fired every flare he had left and shot arrows from his bow. Yet, the beings seemed unaffected by his attacks. For hours, the humanoids persisted in their attempts to ascend, while he fought to stay conscious. Finally, just before dawn, the entities withdrew, and the craft vanished into the sky. And the craft vanished into the sky. Exhausted and shaken, the hunter climbed down and made his way to the road, where his hunting party found him. The Ickle Moore Entity Photograph. On a cold December morning in 1987, Philip Spencer, a former police officer and amateur photographer, set out for a walk across the desolate Yorkshire moors. As he wandered, he noticed movement in the distance, a small humanoid figure moving swiftly. Feeling unsettled, Spencer raised his camera and captured a photograph of the being. The figure appeared to be heading toward a metallic, disc-shaped object hovering just above the ground, emitting a faint humming sound. Moments later, the craft vanished into the mist. Confused, Spencer decided to head back home, only to realize his watch had jumped ahead by 2 hours. Though blurry, his photograph appears to depict a small humanoid with elongated arms and an oversized head. Skeptics have argued that the figure could be a person or an animal, though no definitive explanation has been agreed upon. The Beings of Emilson. On May 10, 1978, in the small village of Emilson, Poland, an inexplicable event took place. It was a sunny day when Jan Wolski, a local farmer, was heading home in his horse-drawn cart, following a quiet forest path. Along the way, he noticed 2 unusual figures walking beside his vehicle. The beings appeared humanoid, but were short, clad in tight-fitting suits, with greenish-toned skin. They observed him calmly, remaining silent, yet radiating an odd sense of peace. Showing no fear, Wolski continued his journey as the entities climbed onto the cart, without uttering a word. Moments later, the farmer spotted a large, silver, oval-shaped craft hovering over a clearing in the woods. The beings guided him toward the object, where a platform lifted him into its interior. Inside, he found a simple, smoothed wall space, bathed in dim, ambient light. Without speaking, the entities conducted an examination using advanced-looking instruments. Once finished, they escorted him back to the platform, gently lowering him to the ground. Before departing, the beings made a subtle farewell gesture as the craft slowly ascended. With a fluid motion, the object disappeared into the sky, leaving Wolski alone in the forest. At the site where the craft had hovered, strange imprints were later discovered on the ground. Local authorities took interest in the case, and Wolski underwent extensive psychological evaluations. Experts unanimously concluded that he was an honest man, showing no signs of mental instability or deception. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13, 1997, beneath the clear skies of Phoenix, Arizona, something unfolded that left thousands in awe. The night was calm until a formation of lights appeared, stretching across the night sky in a massive V shape. Glowing amber in color, they moved in silence, defying explanation. Some witnesses described them as separate orbs. Others insisted they were part of a single enormous craft. Reports flooded in from all over Phoenix, with countless people claiming to have witnessed the mysterious display. Police stations, Luke Air Force Base, and local news outlets were overwhelmed with calls from concerned residents. At first, military officials denied any knowledge of the phenomenon, leaving the public in confusion. Days later, Arizona Governor Fife Symington held a press conference featuring someone dressed as an alien, attempting to dismiss the event as a joke. Years afterward, Symington admitted he had personally seen the lights and described the incident as otherworldly. The Air Force later explained that the glowing objects were flares, dropped during training exercises at Luke Air Force Base. However, many witnesses rejected this claim, arguing that the lights they observed did not behave like flares. The Ubatuba Crash. In September 1957, on the Brazilian beach of Ubatuba, a group of local fishermen was enjoying a sunny afternoon. Their peaceful day was suddenly interrupted by a bright object appearing in the sky, rapidly approaching the coast. It was a disc-shaped craft, clearly out of control. Descending at an incredible speed, it exploded in a blinding flash just before reaching the water. The fishermen watched in shock as the UFO shattered into thousands of fragments over the sea and shoreline. Rushing to the impact site, they found small metallic pieces scattered along the sand. The material was unlike anything they had encountered before. One of the fishermen gathered a few fragments and, after some time, sent them to a journalist in Sao Paulo. Examples were later analyzed in laboratories, yielding astonishing results. Tests confirmed that the debris was made of magnesium, with an exceptionally high level of purity. Over the years, further investigations were conducted, yet no definitive explanation was ever reached about what truly happened that day in Ubatuba. The Tehran UFO Incident. On September 19, 1976, something unfolded in the skies over Iran that left the country's military baffled. It was a clear night when Tehran's air traffic control center began receiving multiple reports from citizens witnessing an unusual light overhead. Shifting colors and moving at extraordinary speeds, the object executed maneuvers beyond conventional aircraft capabilities. Eventually, the Imperial Iranian Air Force decided to dispatch an F-4 Phantom II fighter jet to investigate. As the pilot approached the luminous anomaly, he was stunned by its erratic movements. It accelerated rapidly and changed direction with impossible precision. To his shock, the F-4's system suddenly failed. The plane's instruments went dark, and radio communications were lost. With no operational controls, he had no choice but to turn back, at which point the aircraft's systems mysteriously came back online. Shortly after, a second F-4 was launched to continue the interception mission. Upon nearing the object, the pilot saw it emit a beam of light that moved directly toward him. Panicked, he attempted to fire a missile in self-defense, but every system on the jet simultaneously malfunctioned. The main object appeared to be accompanied by smaller lights that moved independently, circling the F-4. Finally, the unidentified craft and its companions made a rapid ascent, vanishing from the area, leaving the Iranian pilots unable to pursue. Detailed reports were drafted, and the incident was formally relayed to U.S. authorities. The Valensole UFO. Maurice Massey, a man known for his seriousness and deep connection to the land, was tending to his fields in the French countryside on a bright morning, July 1st, 1965. Then, a sharp buzzing sound shattering the peaceful silence. Looking up, Massey was astonished to see a metallic, gray, oval-shaped craft descending. It landed gently, supported by 4 slender legs. Intrigued, he cautiously approached, noticing a small door that slid open without a sound. From inside, 2 beings emerged, each about 3 feet tall, with oversized heads and slender bodies, clad in tight-fitting suits. Their large eyes exuded an eerie sense of calm, almost hypnotic in nature. One of the beings raised a small device and pointed it at Massey, instantly overwhelming him with a heavy drowsiness. Though paralyzed, he remained fully aware as he watched the entities methodically inspect the field, moving around the craft with precise, deliberate steps. After what felt like mere minutes, they returned to their ship. The craft lifted off, emitting the same buzzing sound, before vanishing at astonishing speed. The incident was investigated by the National Gendarmerie and specialists in aerial phenomena. Researchers visiting the site found unusual ground markings, as if the soil had been exposed to extreme heat. Years passed before the vegetation fully recovered, but the lavender plants never regained their former strength. The disappearance of Frederick Valentich. On October 21, 1978, young pilot Frederick Valentich took off from Melbourne in his Cessna 182L. While flying over the Bass Strait, something unexpected caught his attention. A light appeared in the sky. Concerned, he contacted air traffic control, reporting that an unidentified object was approaching. He described seeing a large, elongated craft with no wings, no visible engines, and glowing green lights. Controllers assured him there were no other aircraft in the area. Valentich then stated that the object seemed to be toying with him, flying overhead and following his every move. Shortly after, he reported that the craft was now hovering directly above him, and insisted it was not an airplane. Just before transmission abruptly cut off, his Cessna vanished from radar. As if swallowed by the sea, an extensive search was launched, yet no trace of the plane or its pilot was ever found. To this day, no one knows what Valentich truly witnessed, or what happened in his final moments. The beings of Kofu. In the quiet city of Kofu, Japan, on February 23, 1975, 2 young boys experienced an encounter that would capture national attention. Masato Kawano and Katsuhiro Yamahata, both 7 years old, were playing in a field near their homes. Suddenly, a glowing object appeared in the sky, descending gradually. Fascinated, they watched as it settled in a nearby vineyard. The craft had a disc-like shape, with a dome on top, emitting a pulsating orange light. Overcome by curiosity and awe, the boys sprinted toward the mysterious object. As they neared, they witnessed something astonishing. 2 small beings emerged from the craft. The entities were short, with brownish skin, large heads, indistinct facial features, elongated ears, and long arms, clad in glowing uniforms. Because of their bizarre appearance and awkward movements, the boys described them as demons. One of the beings held a strange device that emitted a beam of light in their direction. Terrified, they tried to flee, but found themselves unable to look away. One of the creatures reached out and touched Katsuhiro's shoulder, momentarily paralyzing him. Moments later, the beings returned to their craft, which ascended swiftly, before vanishing into the sky. The Cash Landrum Incident. On December 29, 1980, along a rural highway in Texas, Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson, Kobe, were driving home after an enjoyable dinner. As they passed through a dense pine forest, a bright glow appeared in the sky. Frightened, they pulled over to get a better look. Before them, a massive diamond-shaped object was descending. Hovering at low altitude, it emitted flames toward the ground, producing a deafening roar. Betty stepped out of the car for a closer view, but the intense heat forced her to retreat. Suddenly, nearly 20 helicopters arrived. As the UFO ascended, the aircraft pursued it until both disappeared into the distance. Still shaken, the three continued their journey, but the encounter left lasting effects. Betty, Vicki, and Kobe soon developed severe symptoms: skin burns, nausea, and hair loss. The incident was reported to authorities, yet the Air Force denied any involvement or knowledge of the helicopters. The Crashed Craft of Koyame. On August 25, 1974, deep in the Chihuahua Desert of Mexico, an event unfolded that remains shrouded in mystery. It was a clear night when Mexican military radar detected an unidentified object entering the country's airspace. Moving at an incredible speed, the craft appeared to be out of control, heading toward the mountainous region near Coyame, a small desert town. At the same time, a civilian aircraft took off from El Paso, Texas, on a southbound flight. Shortly after, air traffic controllers lost contact with both the unidentified object and the civilian plane. At sunrise, search teams discovered the wreckage of the civilian aircraft, alongside something far more astonishing. Near the crash site lay a metallic disc-shaped craft, partially embedded in the ground. Though it showed signs of high-speed impact, its structure remained remarkably intact. Mexican military forces secured the area, setting up a perimeter to examine the wreckage, finding that the craft was composed of an unknown material. Authorities decided to transport the object to a military facility for further study. Before they could proceed, unmarked helicopters suddenly appeared in the sky, descending onto the site. Men clad in military-style uniforms, lacking any visible insignia, swiftly took control of the operation. The Mexican team was replaced, and both the craft and the downed aircraft were discreetly transported away. The Mexican government never provided an official explanation for the incident. Some speculate that U.S. forces intervened to recover the craft, fearing it contained extraterrestrial technology. The Allagash abductions. In August 1976, 4 friends set out on an adventure into the remote waters of northern Maine, United States. They were artists, nature enthusiasts seeking inspiration in the serene wilderness of Allagash Lake. On the night of August 20th, the group took a canoe out for a quiet evening of fishing. As they sat in stillness, one of them noticed a light on the horizon. At first it resembled a distant star, but it soon became clear that it was something far larger and much closer. The glowing object began moving toward them, steadily increasing in size. Uneasy, the men watched it as it closed in, revealing a radiant, silent presence hovering over the lake. Panicked, they frantically paddled toward the shore. Yet the object tracked their movements, engulfing the canoe in an intense beam of light. In an instant, everything went black. They had no recollection of how they reached land, or how time had passed. The campfire they had left burning was reduced to embers, suggesting far more time had elapsed than they remembered. As the years passed, each of them began experiencing recurring nightmares, all tied to that night. In their dreams, they recalled being taken aboard a craft, subjected to medical examinations by humanoid beings. Finally, in 1988, the four sought professional help, undergoing regression hypnosis to relive the missing moments. Their recollections were strikingly detailed. Examination rooms, advanced instruments, and emotionless beings with large, black eyes observing them in silence. The Trans-en-Provence UFO. On a cold afternoon in January 1981, Renato Nicolai, a local farmer, was working in his field in southeastern France. A sharp, buzzing sound shattered the quiet, drawing his attention skyward. Above him, a metallic, disc-shaped craft was descending toward the ground. It touched down in a clear area of the land, making very little noise. Frozen in shock, Nikolai watched as the disc remained briefly on the surface before rapidly ascending. Within seconds, it vanished into the darkness. Still stunned, he approached the landing site, discovering two concentric rings imprinted on the soil. The ground appeared scorched, as if exposed to intense heat, and nearby plants looked withered. Concerned, the farmer reported the incident to authorities, who soon arrived to investigate the mysterious event. France's study group on unidentified aerospace phenomena took the case seriously. Analysis confirmed that the soil had been subjected to extreme pressure. Physical and chemical anomalies in the vegetation suggested possible exposure to electromagnetic radiation. The death of Thomas Montel. On January 7, 1948, Captain Thomas Montel was piloting his P-51 Mustang over Kentucky. It was a calm afternoon with no unusual activity expected during the flight. Suddenly, an emergency call came in from Godman Air Force Base, reporting an unidentified flying object. Witnesses described it as enormous and metallic, hovering in the sky. Montel was ordered to intercept the mysterious craft without hesitation. He accelerated and climbed toward it. As he approached, he reported seeing a massive shining silver disc. But something was wrong. As he continued to ascend, he began losing control. It is believed that at such a high altitude, he may have suffered from oxygen deprivation, causing him to lose consciousness. At 25,000 feet, his aircraft became unstable and entered a steep dive. The plane crashed into an open field, killing Montell instantly. The true cause of this incident remains unknown. Some claim it was a weather balloon, while others insist it was a genuine UFO. The giant UFO of Yukon. On the night of December 11, 1996, something extraordinary unfolded in the skies over the Yukon Territory, Canada. Nearly 30 witnesses from different locations reported seeing an unidentified flying object. Its size was staggering. Some compared it to a football field, with lights that bathed the night landscape in an eerie glow. Moving silently, it glided at low altitude over roads and lakes. Some described the craft as having a boomerang or V shape. It appeared solid, completely blocking out the stars as it passes overhead. Authorities launched an investigation, yet no explanation was ever found for the sighting. Craft and beings in Wigan. A report detailing this sighting was later declassified in the UK Ministry of Defence. In 2003, in the town of Wigan, Lancashire, an event unfolded that left both investigators and residents baffled. One witness claimed to have seen 17 spacecraft flying in a V-shaped formation. The objects had an oblong shape, with wings and varying colors. The most astonishing detail came from the witness's statement. He reported seeing the extraterrestrial beings with green skin and cream-colored bellies. The Close Encounter of Cusack. This is one of the UFO reports made public by the French government in 2007. On a bright August 29, 1967, 13-year-old Francois and his 9-year-old sister, Anne-Marie, were tending their cattle in Cusack, a small village in central France. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, and everything was peaceful, until they noticed something unusual on the horizon. Francois spotted it first, initially mistaking the figures for children playing. As he got a better look, he realized they were 4 small beings with black skin and oversized heads. The siblings watched in shock as the creatures moved around a floating metallic craft. It was spherical, with a dome on top, reflecting sunlight with an almost blinding glare. Frozen in fear, Francois and Anne-Marie stood still as one of the beings turned to look at them and emitted a high-pitched sound. In an instant, the figures floated up and disappeared into the hovering sphere. Without making a sound, the craft began to spin, then shot upward into the sky. Terrified, the children sprinted back to the village to report what had happened. Authorities investigating the scene later detected a strong, sulfur-like odor at the spot where the craft had allegedly landed. The Colossal Craft of Corbridge. On February 28, 1999, along a road in Corbridge, United Kingdom, an astonishing sighting took place. Witnesses reported the presence of an enormous object in the sky. Described as a craft the size of 10 football fields, it had a distinct arrowhead shape. Its sheer scale and unusual form made this case particularly remarkable. The Falcon Lake UFOs. On May 20th, 1967, along the shores of Falcon Lake, Canada, an event unfolded that left one man permanently scarred, both physically and emotionally. It was a crisp morning when Stefan Michalak, an amateur geologist and nature enthusiast, set out to explore the area in search of minerals. As he examined some rock formations, an unusual noise broke the silence, a high-pitched beeping sound coming from above. Looking up, he saw 2 disc-shaped objects descending toward a clearing, with one of them landing smoothly on the rocky surface. The other craft hovered briefly before rapidly flying away. Believing it to be some kind of experimental aircraft, Michalak cautiously approached, feeling an intense heat radiating from it. Without warning, a hatch opened on the side, revealing an interior filled with flashing lights and mechanical sounds. Curious, he moved closer and attempted to communicate, yet no response came from within. As the craft began rotating, a blast of scorching air erupted from a vent on its side, striking Michalak in the chest and throwing him backward. Investigators later detected traces of radiation at the landing site, along with a significant magnetic anomaly. The Exeter Incident. In the early hours of September 3, 1965, the small town of Exeter, United States, 18-year-old Norman Muscarello was making his way home. Walking along a deserted road, he suddenly spotted a massive glowing oval-shaped UFO silently hovering. Terrified, he sprinted to the nearest police station to seek help. His genuine fear and serious demeanor convinced Officer Eugene Bertrand to accompany him back to the site. Astonishingly, upon arrival, the officer also witnessed the lights. The UFO was still hovering over the field, gliding slowly without a sound. Moments later, the object moved toward the patrol car, stopping nearby and flooding the vehicle interior with an intense glow. Its movements were erratic, displaying maneuvers beyond the capabilities of any known aircraft. Both men, gripped by fear, watched as it eventually drifted away, vanishing into the night. The Air Force later dismissed the sighting, attributing it to commercial aircraft lights or the refraction of bright planets. The Kenneth Arnold Case. On June 24, 1947, private pilot Kenneth Arnold was flying over the Cascade Mountains in Washington. The sky was clear, offering perfect visibility. In the distance, something unusual caught his eye: flashes of metallic light. He spotted 9 airborne objects flying in formation, reflecting the sun like mirrors in the sky. They were thin, disc-shaped, and moving at remarkable speed. Arnold estimated they were traveling at around 1,700 miles per hour, approximately 2,700 kilometers per hour. An astonishing velocity for that era. The objects had no tails or visible propulsion systems and moved erratically, like discs skipping across water. He attempted to follow them, but within seconds they disappeared behind a mountain range. Upon landing, Arnold described his sighting to reporters, likening their motion to that of saucers, leading the press to coin the term flying saucers. That simple phrase ignited a worldwide fascination with UFOs. The Kecksburg UFO. On the afternoon of December 9, 1965, a glowing object streaked across the sky over Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, leaving a fiery trail in its wake. Some witnesses initially believed it to be a meteorite entering the atmosphere. However, instead of disintegrating, the object appeared to maneuver before descending into a nearby forest. A few onlookers described it as having a bell-like shape, adorned with strange markings resembling hieroglyphs. Within hours, the area was sealed off by military personnel, raising suspicion among local residents. Soldiers blocked civilians from approaching, and some townspeople claimed they saw the object being loaded onto a military truck. The official explanation stated that a meteor had crashed, yet no one outside the authorities was allowed to see it. The Levelland UFO. On November 2, 1957, the small town of Levelland, Texas, became the site of an extraordinary UFO event. It all began around 11 p.m. when two young men, Pedro Saucedo and Joe Salas, were driving along a dark highway. Suddenly, a radiant object, surrounded by a bluish glow, appeared above them. Saucedo slammed on the brakes as his truck's engine unexpectedly shut off. Stunned, they watched as the craft hovered over their vehicle. The moment it vanished into the distance, the truck's engine restarted, as if nothing had happened. Other witnesses described a large object approaching their cars, causing electrical failures that turned off both engines and headlights. The Air Force investigation later concluded that the witnesses had likely observed a combination of atmospheric phenomena. The beings of Broadhaven. On February 4, 1977, in the small Welsh village of Broadhaven, 14 children ran into the fields behind their school during recess. Their playtime was abruptly interrupted by a bizarre sight. An elongated silver craft had landed nearby. Dimly illuminated, it featured a dome on top. The astonished children then witnessed something even more incredible: a humanoid figure standing near the vessel. It had an unusual appearance, clad in a form-fitting metallic suit, moving slowly as if surveying the area. At first, their teachers dismissed the story, but as more children independently described the same details, they began taking it seriously. Thus we conclude this fascinating journey through the history of UFO encounters and what could be interactions with extraterrestrial beings. A phenomenon that may still hold unexpected surprises for the future. Now, we face a series of thought-provoking questions. Could some of our modern technologies stem from reverse engineering these mysterious crafts? Are we truly prepared for contact with beings from other worlds? Would our society be capable of handling the truth?